How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to another edition of the Stupid Questions podcast. Today on the pod, we're going to be talking with Alexey Vermeulen. He is a professional cyclist from the Boulder area, grew up in Michigan, and how he got into cycling. First, into road cycling is quite the amazing story where he had an interaction with his grandfather who was huge into cycling, who had the dream of becoming a professional cyclist. And it's just a really touching story that I want you guys to really focus on and listen to. I hope you enjoy it. But yeah, to see how far Alexey has come and the journey that he's been on is quite a inspiring one. So I hope you enjoy it. And without further ado, I want to introduce you to Alexey Vermeulen. Right now.
Back in Boulder.
Nice. Is that where you've lived for quite a while?
We moved here in 2020. So it's been, enough. Sorry, let me turn down stir on because my computer is bouncing. There we go.
That's all good.
We moved here in 2020, kind of obviously mid-pandemic. My girlfriend got a job and we just jumped ship. And I was like, weird place. And it was even weirder at the time.
Yeah.
So you couldn't go into town and do a group ride or meet with anybody. But yeah, we actually just bought a house here last November.
Oh, congratulations. Is this your first home, purchasing of a home?
First home, very poor. Everything costs more money. I thought I'd be excited about it.
Yeah, I've heard Boulder's it's a nice place, but in terms of pricing for real estate, it's not ideal if you're wanting to save
I think it's just hard from where you grow up. I grew up in Michigan and I was for what I put down as a down payment, I was I could have bought a house total. I would own the house. I'd have no mortgage, Yeah,
no kidding.
But it's also, it's where you live. It's location nowadays. So.
Yeah, for sure. So Michigan, what part of Michigan did you grow up in?
Grew up just outside Ann Arbor.
Okay.
In this little town called Dexter. Went to high school outside there. And I'm still obsessed. I think where you grow up, you always have this connection to, obviously.
Yeah,
but
it pulls you back.
Yeah, there's just something I love Boulder in the sense of for a bike rider to be here, take away the altitude and the scientific side of it. It's a beautiful place to ride a bike. There's something special about Michigan in the summer, fresh water everywhere. You can go jump in the lake. Boulder, everyone's oh, let's go jump in the reservoir. It's 80 degrees. And I'm nah, that doesn't sound very exciting to me.
Yeah, go take a bath midsummer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Michigan, so I grew up in North Carolina.
Cool.
Obviously a bit different there in terms of just elevation and scenery and whatnot, but I always had this vendetta against Michigan, I think, for the longest time, just because it was flat. However, I got the opportunity to work up there for a couple of years and would travel there once or twice a month. On the opposite side of Michigan, over near, I guess Grand Rapids was the closest city, but I'm trying to think. South Haven. Have you ever heard of South Haven?
Yep.
Yeah, it's a little coastal town. But I actually
Beautiful.
Yeah, it was gorgeous and beautiful. Some of the cliff sides, and then I love the snow, so I'd go up there in the winter, and you could go up to the lake and dip in it if it wasn't completely frozen over by that time. But yeah, I actually grew to like Michigan, and I feel you can grow anything in the soil up there. It's just pristine for growing conditions.
Yeah, I think it's hard for a lot of people with that, it's really gray for 4 months. And I get that, but I also have this feeling sometimes that I don't want every day to be perfect. I could never live in California, love California, but I don't ever want every day to be sunny.
Yeah.
And I think it's just the way you grow up and what you do. I grew up with two brothers. We played hockey in the winter. You got the snow shoveling business. You make more cash than you ever think's possible, right? And that evolution of activities changing throughout the seasons is kind of exciting.
Yeah.
And you still get that in Boulder, but especially as you move west, it's just harder and harder. You just don't get as much of it.
Yeah.
I think it's just like you're saying, whether it's ice plunging or going on for a perfect summer day in July, I will also say, sidebar, Michigan has the least natural disaster of anywhere.
Yeah.
And there's also a lot of fresh water. So when shit hits the fan, Michigan will be a place to be.
Yeah, way up in the UP, hide in the woods.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think there's something to that. With the seasons changing, there's a lot to be learned as a kid just from, and a lot of enjoyment. Because especially in school, you're looking forward to the big holidays. So Christmas comes around, summer comes around, spring and fall. There's a lot to be said for just the change of pace. the older I get, the more I do enjoy kind of what you were talking about with the California sunny every day type of a thing. But there's in discomfort, I think breeds discipline. So if you're going to live somewhere with four seasons, I think it could be a good thing. But yeah, dude. Well, first off, just want to officially say thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time. I know you are a busy guy with the irons in the fire. I'm sure there are multiple of them and look forward to jumping into some of those things. But officially, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Sorry I moved a couple times.
No, it's all good. Yeah, you're not as bad as, and I'll call him out, Matt Lieto. There's this one guy I was trying to get on literally for like a whole year. I don't know if you know who he is, but literally it was like, oh, I gotta move it. Oh, I gotta move it because he lives his day by like his life by day. So, but yeah, it's all good, man. So let me ask this first question for you. One of my favorites to start most of the podcast with, and that is a third person question. From your perspective, who is Alexey?
Identity, the guy with the dog, just straight. It's the guy who rides his bike with his dog.
Sir Willie.
I think a lot of people view me as one of the better off-road cyclists in the country. Maybe one of the only guys who has a chance to beat Keegan. I would say the other part of me is that I've been with a lot of the partners that I have since I moved from the road. So I'm very much, I think when people see Kenda or they see Envy, they think of me and vice versa, which is kind of what I believe in with relationships.
Okay. So outside of sport, who are you?
Still third person?
Yeah. Or you can bring it back to first person if it's easier.
Yeah, I mean, outside of sport, I mean, I think I grew up addicted to sport. Like that was my whole entire being. And I think you hear this with a lot of people who are successful. I was just so focused on this big goal of making it to the world tour. I wanted to go do the Tour de France. No questions asked. And pushed a lot of things and made quote unquote sacrifices, which I think at that age, I hate that word because at that age it's not a sacrifice. You have your eye on something. Like who cares about homecoming? I was like, I want to be in Europe. I don't care about homecoming. But kind of total goal on that. And so outside of sport, I always just loved learning. Like when I was going to go to college, like I wanted to become some kind of doctor. I wanted to go to pre-med, wanted to work with athletes. But I've always just been very enamored by the way humans react and communicate with each other. Why and where and how we're able to push ourselves further. And I think a lot of that comes down to just being able to talk to people and being able to communicate and think through things logically and look at the blocks ahead of you and the paths ahead of you and build things in a stable way. And so beyond sport, I think it's always just learning, whether it's moving my professional racing career to off-road and having to completely learn how to run a business or running different projects and having to learn how to do film and content. I think it's all tied back in to my life as a cyclist because that's kind of the nucleus of it. But I've tried to soak up everything. And I always come back to like any young person asking me advice. I'm like, if you can listen twice as much as you talk, it'll go really easy. If it's 50-50, you're always going to struggle.
Yeah, thanks for diving into that. There's a lot of material I could jump at there. So first, I just want to ask on the communication aspect, because you are a communicator that's really part of your job, obviously with YouTube, with Instagram, you're communicating for sponsors, and then also just with, I think, everyday people, you do a good job of, I don't know, I've watched a lot of YouTubers, and the way that you do things is definitely unique to you in terms of your communication style and the way that you've put things together. So that desire to be a good communicator, where does that come from? Was that something from a very young age that you were kind of focused on and like, oh, I need to do this to become that? Or is it more of a nature thing or nurture thing?
I think it's a little bit nature. So I have two younger brothers. So I think always like, I don't know, I want 3 kids because I felt like as great a job as my parents did, I was raised by my brothers. Like we all made mistakes. We all talked about it.
Sure.
One might get too drunk. One might get to make a mistake, and you talk through things like better than parents can. So I think part of it was just that. How do you communicate with someone that most of the time wants to hit you with a stick and occasionally will listen to you? Like I always had this juxtaposition of my middle brother and I are 2 years apart. we always grew up, in each other's throats because we're competitive. Two boys, right? Who can snow shovel fastest? Who can stick handle fastest? Who can race a bike fastest? Like, is whatever it was. And that pushed me to be a better athlete. And he always kind of hated being the athlete in a sense because I always took over it. He's 2 years older, was a little bit stronger. And I would never get close to the kid. He'd punch me in the face. And we always said the reason why my brother's name is Rem, he would always be successful whatever he did, is like, if you got in a fight, it would take two of us, the youngest and myself, to take him on because he would not stop. There's no quit. You pin him down, he'll bite you, right? Like, there's no limit to it. And that's something like I don't think I have, but also there's part of you that learns from that. And the whole transition of that is he got married this past year in May. And I'm like sitting outside my brother where, we're having a little bit of whiskey and everyone's talking through. It's an hour before the wedding. And my brother's getting married. The middle one comes and says, "Hey, can you do my hair?" And I was like, am I going to get punched in the face right now? Like, what's happening? And I'm like slowly doing his hair. And I'm like, okay,
afraid to touch him. Yeah.
It's good. I'm good. But I think it's just the point of like communication doesn't always have to be immediate and you don't have to feel like it's going well all the time. But I've learned how to enjoy and figure out what's best for everybody at any given time, whether that's a business relationship with sponsors where there's money being exchanged hands, or whether that's family relationships or just friends, right? Is that at the end of the day, the river never flows both ways at the same time. Someone is always receiving, someone is always giving. And then how do you make that feel at the end of the day that everyone's not how do you make that feel like nobody's getting screwed at the end of the day?
Yeah.
I don't know. I've always loved that.
The concept of like giving more than you get, was that something that you went into your first ever contracted like relationships with brands, or maybe it's a team or whatever? Is that something you went with in the beginning, like that was a focus, or is it something you've learned over time?
I would say I tried to keep my mouth closed for quite a long time. Probably like even through racing on the road, like I was 23, 24 when I left the road in 2018. And even at that time, I didn't feel like I had enough experience to give somebody advice. If someone asked a direct question, I'd answer it, of course. Like, how do you do this? Or how do you do that? But I'd always defer to, like, oh, what do you eat before a race? Oh, nutritionist on BMC recommends we do this, as opposed to saying my experience or my expertise. I think that transition from the road to gravel taught me a lot. And I also feel like I got to that point of like past 25 where I had enough life experience of what had worked for me and other people around me to give advice to other people. Because I remember a direct time, like leaving the road, it's one of the reasons I wanted to leave is that pro teams are a group of 28 riders under one name. And that team wants, if there's a question answered, they don't want 28 different answers. They want one answer coming out of the can. And so I felt like that was so wrong for someone trying to learn about something, because the reality is all 28 people are not the same.
Yeah.
And the reality is those 28 different answers are what relates to everybody else around and normal everyday people. And so when I left, that's what I took, is like whatever Instagram message I get, whatever person I have at the race, that is always gonna be more important than my race. Right. And that losing that little bit of ego, I think it hurt a little bit, but it was kind of like drove me to exactly what you're talking about, to kind of find that line and balance of like what it means to be a professional athlete and how you work through those relationships with anybody. And you just slowly figure out what you think you're good enough to talk about and what you've learned and how you can make it relatable to somebody in their own life, not just yours. Like one thing I've never done is I've never coached. I've had the same coaches as I was 14. I've had a lot of people ask me to coach. And I have no hard feelings to athletes that do to make money. But I don't believe an athlete is a great coach, because the reality is we're just regurgitating what we have learned from somebody else and pretending that's ours, because this is what worked for me. This is how it does for you. That experience can be helpful, but until you have learned from multiple different athletes or gone to school to learn about how science works, it's really easy to pawn things off in one direction.
Interesting concept. So this is something I've actually thought about a lot, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on it, because it sounds like you sort of answered it, but maybe not entirely. So this concept of like who we are as individuals is a collective group of experiences and memories. And what's interesting about memories is like, I can remember, we can both be at the same event and remember kind of two very separate or different things because our perspectives are obviously different and how we take in the world is obviously different. But my question is, because now you're what, 30 years old? Yeah.
Yep.
So you've moved into the age of wisdom.
It's all downhill from here.
Yeah, exactly. But for us, like as we're getting older, for a long time, it is just a regurgitation. But I think that there is an age at which you can start to come up with like original ideas. But even then, you could make an argument that like there's nothing truly new under the sun. So like, do you believe that if it's ever possible to come up with an original idea or method or protocol for a specific set of, it could be training, it could be business, it could be anything.
100%. I think there's a time and a place for that switch changes. And I think that generically saying like athletes shouldn't be coaches is wrong. I just think generically a great athlete doesn't make a great coach. Like, let's use hockey, for example. The best of all time, Wayne Gretzky, coached the LA Kings for a while. He's horrible as a coach, right? Mm-hmm. He thought of things the way he did it. He was the star player. Everyone passed to him and he made things happen. That's not how NHL is anymore. So when he went and coached, he either had to learn on the dot and figure it out, which he didn't, or it was going to go badly. And so I think when I look at athletes, like if you are able to like soak up knowledge around you and you want to learn, you're going to be a great coach because you've not only listened to what your coach has told you, but you're also reading around. You're watching those YouTube channels. You're learning from nutritionists. You're able to provide concrete thoughts based not only on your own experiences, but like people around you and how things are moving and the evolution of sport. I think it's more just oftentimes when athletes start being coaches too early, it's easy to just regurgitate because they're still focused on their own thing. Like right now, if I were to create programs for somebody, like I have a couple of friends, like, what are these workouts to do? You just go take them from your coach or what you've done or what you remember in the past because that's what's easy. You don't have time to think about and learn and create things that are original. And I think that's just me. It's just easier like that.
Yeah.
It's hard to take in all these things and then narrow that into an original idea.
Yeah, for sure. And you're talking, it sounds a little bit more like professional athletes, like athletes that you're training, 20, 30 hours a week. Is that more of like the demographic you're talking about? Or are you talking about any type of
I'm
athlete?
kind of talking about anybody. Okay. Like I think generically, it's this whole world, like when you grow up, at some point, the first thing most people realize is, okay, money is going to be how my life is controlled a little bit, right? I might be able to like create my pathway, but at some point the guidelines, however wide they might be, are financial. Hey, I want to travel the world. That's cool. How are you going to fund that, right? Are you just going to work at hostels? Or are you going to do this? Or you can do that? There's always ways to fix it. So I think that's what I'm getting at is it's very easy to see it as the way to move forward sometimes, which isn't always best. And that I think I'm trying to compare it, I guess, now that I think back and you bring it up, I guess it is majority professional athletes, but it's also just in general, like how do you use the knowledge you've learned that's actually valuable to other people generically? Because, if everything I learned was just about cycling, that's a very small niche that's valuable to. Yeah. If I'm able to like take what I've learned and spread it out to all different sports or different areas of business, then it's more valuable to other people anytime I talk. So I don't think you have that life experience or wisdom until you kind of make the mistakes and learn through it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, mistakes are the great teacher, any level of failure for sure. It's interesting you're talking about like coaching, and I'm kind of reflecting on my own journey the past couple of years with coaching and being coached. And I basically, for the past 4 years or so, have been coached. But last October, I made the decision to kind of go off and do like coach myself. And I think honestly, because I do coach several athletes, that's when my coaching really leveled up. Because I got to this point where I was kind of always questioning things, and I was like, I don't know. Let me put my money where my mouth is and like test what I'm doing. And now, honestly, like before, if I'm being completely honest, my athletes don't leave me for saying this, but like a lot of my prior workouts that I was assigning was more or less based off of percentages of what I was doing, and then you just kind of pass it on, and Training Peaks does the rest.
And what worked for you.
Yeah, and what worked for me. And even sometimes what didn't work for me. So that's where it started to make the mistake. But yeah, going off on my own now, it's like, Oh, this is actually a lot different. I think out of a lot of coaches, and I say a lot, with the experience that I've had with some coaches, it's like I think that most people probably over assign, like give way too much out of a fear of like, oh, I'm not doing enough. And like, really, I think it's on the backside of that where true success happens. But at least I'm not a professional athlete, so you could push back on that.
Yeah, but I think what you said is exact, right? If you turn it to yourself and you learn from that, and you learn from the injuries you could have and the mistakes you've made, and kind of your success is also based on it, that's kind of, I think, what I'm like, I wasn't articulating it well, but you just nailed it on the head. You're able to actually focus on giving real information as opposed to just taking, changing the percentages and moving on.
Yeah.
And that is really hard when, even if you have a coach, it's really hard to do that because it's really hard in your mind to actually separate those things. And that's in every, like, that could be everything, right? It can be sports psych, that can be nutrition, that can be, you know, we always had this joke with the nutritionists when I was on BMC that I was like, oh, you know, we had two nutritionists over the 3 years I was there. And one, they both loved carbs, obviously, but one was like, oh, potatoes are the best carb ever. Rice is not it, right? And the next one was like, oh, only rice. Potatoes are not a good one. And you're like, okay, this is just experience for you and your expectations. They're both simple carbs, right? And so the reality was like, you take that with a grain of salt, you learn from that situation, and now you get to add value. And I tell this story all the time now when people talk about nutrition, I was like, it's how it affects you. If you like eating pasta or if you like eating rice or oats or potatoes, who cares? It's what you can get down and eat. It's the nutritionist, if they tell you one thing's right, then they're wrong.
Yeah, every system is built so differently, just like personality, just like anything.
100%.
So switching gears for a second, just because I totally forgot to ask, pronounce for me your last name.
So it's different. In America, I just say kind of like it looks. It's Vermeulen, like Mew as in like take the E out, just Mew. In Dutch, where it's from, it's kind of like a more Mau, like Vermeulen. But I don't think anybody sponsors that. Yeah. It's definitely a difficult one. I remember the first time somebody in Europe, and I went over the first time at 16, with my same last name, told me how they said their last name, and I was like, oh, I'm the wrong one.
Yeah, that'll teach you a thing or two. Are your parents first or second generation, like here in the U.S., or were they from?
So my grandfather immigrated from Holland after the war. He's actually the one that got me into cycling. He raced before the war. And they immigrated to Canada. So my dad's actually from Canada, and then met my mom in the U.S. We grew up.
Nice.
So.
That's a cool relationship. Like, to say their grandfather got you into cycling. Tell me a little bit about that growing up.
It's really special. My grandfather started the London Cycling Club in Ontario. And it was always the craziest thing I'd ask him about, or I'd walk into his basement, and his basement was just full of bike wheels, like a service course. And he'd have the bikes and the trainer downstairs, and he'd always ride. And my dad always had this, he'd always tell us like the most comforting sound to him was cars passing on the highway. And I always thought that was so crazy, but he literally would fall asleep in the back seat when my grandfather rode on the back seat of the bike. So cars would pass, and like that was his comforting sound. You'd be asleep and cars passing. I was like, that's a little messed up. That's no, but
yeah, that gives most of us PTSD.
But yeah, my grandfather, he never raced again after he immigrated from Holland. I think obviously the war had a big impact on that. Yeah. But he did a lot of long rides. Like my grandmother and him would do 100-mile rides, and they'd do these things. And so when they come visit us in Michigan, kind of the first times I remembered, we do bike rides, like little things. And slowly I remember, like probably as 11 or 12 years old, the local bike shop, Aberdeen, was like, hey, we got this 24-inch wheeled Trek if Alexey wants to try it out. You know, they're probably trying to sell it to my parents. And my grandfather was like, cool, I'll bring my bike. We'll go for a ride. Like you'd think like, oh, 11, 12, easy ride. Like my grandfather was like, cool, let's ride over here and back. And I was like, now I look back, it's like, that was like 60 miles. Like, I was like, and I just completely cracked. And talked about this a lot, but one of my first like real memories on a bike was I completely bonked. Like, I was probably 15 miles away still. And I'd like pedal as hard as I could and like fall back into my grandfather's hand. He'd give me a push. I'd pedal again for 2-3 minutes. Like he'd fall back into his hand. He'd give me a push. And that was like the whole way home, the last hour or so. And I think I learned a lot from that. It went from that into like my mom was doing triathlons at the time. I did some kids triathlons, and I'd always loved running too. Swimming sucks. It's horrible. Um, I was just a skinny kid who like I'd swim my laps and I'd get out and shiver on the side. I'd be like, oh, it's so cold. And like stay in the water. I was like, that's stupid. I don't want the water. But it kind of just evolved. Like I was good at kids triathlons. I was good at running and cycling. And so I think that first moments with my grandfather were really pivotal. It was quite sad before I really started making it in cycling. He passed away from cancer.
I'm sorry, man.
So it's just one of those, I think, not like moments that makes you remember, but in some of those hard moments, like it was always, that's what I think about, right? Is like, well, how would he have envisioned this or how proud would he have been in this moment? Because I almost felt like it was his career that he never got to finish. And it was, I was over racing in Holland, right? I signed my World Tour contract for a Dutch team. Like it felt very connected.
Yeah, 100%. I can only imagine how that would have affected him.
So my grandmother was proud, and that was always the nice part, but it was never really her journey, and I think she was like, it was always hard for us to talk about like my grandmother and I, because we'd be like, oh, like Opa would think about this, like,
Yeah.
oh, but yeah, you like don't want to talk because you're both about to start crying.
Yeah, 100%. Oh man, yeah. I mean, just the picture that it's being painted in my mind from your words of him pushing you, when you're bonking out there and then signing the contract back in his homeland. I mean, that's a crazy turn of events. How old was he when he entered and then exited the war? Do you know?
I think they moved in 37.
Okay.
Don't know exactly.
Yeah. Sheesh. Wow. What a crazy story. So with your mother, obviously she's proud of you. How do your own mother and father sit in the story of proud or support, or maybe not so supportive in your world of cycling?
Yeah, I mean, insanely supportive. I think the hardest part was they had 3 boys, and we thought hockey was expensive, so was cycling. I think we picked all the most expensive sports in the world.
Yeah, no kidding.
But yeah, I mean, I think they were all about it. They never pushed us to do anything, but my parents are both athletic, and like my mom was one doing triathlons, and that's how we like all started doing like just kids triathlons for fun. It just slowly evolved. I'd say I probably like first found success in running. Like I was pretty good at running. I enjoyed it, and I especially liked like talk about the relationships and communication. Like I loved the team aspect of the individual team aspect of cross country. Like I thought it was so cool, that like you could be the fastest runner, but if you don't have the rest of the team, then it didn't matter.
Yeah, you gotta work together.
So like as I grew up, like I feel like kind of cycling move up 2 steps, and then they go down 1 year. The next running went to move up 2 steps, and it took a while for me to have to make a decision. But my parents were always just super supportive. Probably the real financial burden was like that, like 14, 15, 16 time where they were paying for a lot of it, and then 16, I won nationals and slowly started to take that off of them. Like the national team started helping and was able to go over to Europe and spend time. And I think then it was just kind of them watching from afar and trying to give advice where they could. I really give them a lot of credit because like 16 years old, they said, we trust you, have fun in Europe, like that's hard for a lot of parents
young,
to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, really young. And it shaped a lot of who I am. Like I learned how to be an adult at a very young age, which I like. I give so much credit to, because there's like my best quality as a human, as a professional athlete, is the way I think. I know exactly, I feel like when I stack blocks in my head, they're not off center. They are just straight up. I know exactly where I'm going. I'm able to turn the light switch on and off in terms of I'm going to be the best version of the person I want to be at the expo all around the race up until 6:30 in the morning when the race starts. And then I can turn on the competitive side of myself all the way until I finish and then turn it right off. And that ability to kind of move in and out and of that like flow state of being a professional athlete and being a killer, and then going back into what it means to be an actual good human in my mind, I think is really hard. I've learned for a lot of people, because it's not, sometimes you feel like you're out there preparing for your race to get your pre-race ride, and you're like, I don't want to be on my feet for 6 hours, but I'm able to somehow reprioritize things constantly. And so the mental side of this sport in my life has always been my greatest attribute. And I give a lot of that to 16 years old being in Europe. Like you just learn how to make decisions. It's not you can't turn around and be like, oh, what do you think? Like I'm sitting there, someone's saying, okay, like, what do I do here? I can't speak the language. I can't do this. What do I do? And so I think that gave my parents a lot of respect for that, because would have been easy to say, no, stay here, go to school. You know, I had to like do school online, and changed a lot of the academic side of what I was doing.
Yeah. As you made that move over to Europe, and you're, I guess, more in like this collective training environment, like you said, you're doing school online, your friends and peers now become kind of your training mates. But I'm curious, when you came back home, maybe, I don't know how it works, but maybe during furloughs or breaks or whatever it was, when you tried to reconnect with family or even friends of like the same age category, did you notice kind of a difference in the maturity levels that you interacted with? Hey guys, sorry to interrupt really quick. Just wanted to share something. First of all, this is not a paid ad. However, if you've been watching and listening for a while, you'll know that I talk about precision fuel and hydration, or drink out of this bottle constantly. That is of my own money. I pay for all the products, the gels, the tablets, the bottles, all for myself. I reached out to them and asked if I could get some stuff to offer to our listeners for you guys, just as a way to say thank you for listening to the pod. So first off, if you want 15% off, you can use code in all caps, SETH dash PFH for 15% off. So that's SETH-PFH for 15% off of all the products. Or you can just go to the link in the show notes, that is visit.pfandh.com/Seth-Hill. Again, it's in the show notes. However, this is the big thing. If you guys want to book a free 20-minute call with their team to be able to get a strategy for how to revolutionize, really, if you guys are into this, how to revolutionize the way that you do your sports nutrition, specifically on the sodium and hydration front. This has been huge for me in the past couple of years. It's really helped me to perform better, and I think it could help you guys too. But this is them giving their time to you for free. So make sure to go check that out. The links are in the descriptions for the 20-minute call. That's visit.pfandh.com/Seth-Hill/calls. Anyway, check out the show notes. I'm sorry, I'll quit talking. And again, that code is Seth-PFH for 15% off. All right. Thank you guys so much. Again, this isn't a paid ad, but I had to share that with you guys. So I hope you enjoy it. Thank you. Back to the show. No?
I don't know. I think I've always been a little immature, as much as I can think through things. Like,
You still kept that.
I'm the spazzy kid, like who wants to do anything and jump around and be silly. I also it's pretty cool. My principal at the time brought in a program that cost school a good bit of money. There's myself and then another girl who was an equestrian. So he brought in this program that you could do online school, but that you physically had a seat in every class. So you could graduate with your class, you could run cross country with the team. So like I was still able to be involved whenever I came home. So this sounds silly, but like I may or may not have kept up in I did not keep up in terms of like math and science and stuff. So like if I went to those classes, it would have been probably silly, but I would wake up when I was home at 6 a.m. to go do orchestra at 7, because it was that time I could be with my friends and hang out, which like sounds, now I'm like, why would I do that? That sucks. But it was that moment of like reconnection, right? I didn't lose any of that through, probably sophomore year was probably the hardest decision in terms of, like between running and riding. Moving into like, 9th grade, I had quit soccer and hockey, and kind of focused on just running and riding, because they were different seasons. But I started to get good enough at both that there was going to be a decision that was made.
Yeah. Which way?
Yeah, in my sophomore year, like just when things come together, like I was the fastest sophomore in the state of Michigan. Like everyone's telling you got to run, like right near University of Michigan, like one of the best cross country programs in the nation. And you're like, what do I do here, right? Like all your friends here that aren't over in Europe and all across the nation are like, oh, you're definitely a runner. Mm-hmm. But then there's that part of you at that age is like, yeah, but I kind of like traveling to Europe and Austria and Poland and Belgium, and like it's so different. So I think that's where the difference was, is like I saw the world a little differently than people my age, who might have gone to Florida on spring break, but I was just going to these places and like living and learning. And so as that kind of, I say from like freshman to junior year, that's where the big transition happened in terms of just like life experience. I just think I took in a lot more than anyone else my age. It wasn't that I was more mature per se. I just had a different viewpoint on life. Like I said, those things that are sacrifices to most people, or when parents ask, like, how do you make your kid make a sacrifice? Like, they weren't sacrifices in my mind.
Yeah.
I knew what I wanted.
Opportunities, and you really, you relished in them.
Yeah. And the last thing, just to be clear for people, like, so 16 years old, I spent like 3 months in Europe. Like, wasn't like living in Europe for full time, but like, a month away at a time is quite a bit at that age.
Yeah, for sure.
And then as it went up, I think like the next year was 6 months. when I was a junior and senior. And then after that, it was like almost 9 months when I was on BMC.
Um, Really quick, just kind of by the way, because you mentioned it, orchestra. What did you play?
Violin.
Do you still play?
I have it. It's at my parents' house. I haven't brought it to the new house, but I haven't brought many things now that we bought a house. We didn't have much room. I'd love to. I fiddle every time I'm home, but I wouldn't say like, I feel like you don't lose that, like the dexterity of like using your fingers and hitting the correct string. But I wouldn't say there's anything like masterful coming out. Weird tangent. I also have my birthday's the same as Beethoven, so
Amazing.
all growing up, that was like I would get a symphony every year for my birthday from my great aunt, and so like I still like if I'm doing an endurance ride, probably listening to like one of Beethoven's concertos.
Beethoven, Bach, all those guys.
Yeah,
It's great. It's some of the greatest CDs that I ever had as a kid. That because we would at night play stuff, and my dad was totally sold on. Oh, if you listen to Beethoven, you're gonna be smarter. So I'd crank that on right before bed. Yeah.
And there's a weird like if you listen to it long enough, there's a weird excitement to the music, right? It takes a while to get there. I think people miss that. Like I'm like out cruising and I want to like digest things a little more and think. It's perfect. I think so well with a little bit of classical music in the back and just riding because you're trying to focus on the road ahead and not make mistakes, but then you also want to like separate yourself from what you have back home. So I don't know. I've always loved it.
Oh yeah, there's got to be studies out there. I don't know them, but the frequencies and just the different change in pace and time. Yeah, being able to appreciate the beauties of classical music, I think, has a lot to do with brain development, and it's also crazy too with like cycling, running, swimming, whatever. A lot of these, I guess, bilateral movements, stimulation. You're kind of firing both sides of the brain. It like really helps to process any level of emotion or logical thinking or whatever it is. There's a lot to be said about that. Yeah. So, oh man, what I was going to ask you. So, with your mom and your dad, you mentioned your mom quite a few times on the triathlon front, and she's kind of responsible for, I guess, planting some of those early seeds and getting out there and being active. For your dad and your mom both, who do you think that you are more alike?
That's tough. Probably my mom. My dad was super athletic, but never raced. It's just how, not to make this a religious thing, but my grandfather, as much as he loved cycling, super Catholic and didn't let my dad do anything on Sundays. So he wasn't allowed to do
Oh, he
any
like
type
observed it as like a Sabbath. Yeah.
So he never allowed any like real sport, which I think he actually kind of regretted on his deathbed at watching us grandchildren grow up. But my dad, like I remember vividly, like he would come on every group ride. He was always along. He got us out of the bikes all the time until I was like 14. And I always make this joke that like 14, I like beat him in a sprint and he stopped riding with me. Like he was like, okay, that's let the young one go now. Yeah.
Oh,
but it's kind of come full circle now that I'm back racing off road and kind of come back around in the US because it's we started riding again during COVID and we did like 24 hours Old Pueblo out in Tucson, the mountain bike race. So you race 24 hours with the team. And so we did that together and it's kind of come full circle. But I see my mom has a little bit more of that athletic background. She rode crew in college and she was a gymnast when she was younger. So when it comes to it, she's the one who's always pushing to do events, right? If we're like, oh, let's do the family 5K. Like she was the one who's always pushing the family to get out there and never stops.
Yeah. What's your mom's name? Sandra. We need to be more like Sandra, everybody.
She's pretty impressive. Sometimes I'm like, you did what? Why?
Yeah, that's good. You can be inspired by the parents, grandparents. You got a household full of killers, I guess it sounds like. So that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, my mom used to play hide and go seek in my grandparents' house, and we started playing when we were older, and she was always making fun of us because she was a gymnast, and so she just hide on top of the doors.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's cheating. I can't get up there.
You like walk through. Oh yeah, you like the hide and seek tag? Like you got to tag the person. Yeah. That's such an underrated game. Hide and seek was my favorite game as a kid, especially in any type of grandparent or family member's house that had any type of real estate where you could turn the lights off and play in the dark. Like, just so much fun.
That and capture the flag. Like we were big with three brothers, and this is like, I guess, not to divert again, but with two brothers showing how stubborn my middle brother was. So we would always play 2-versus-1. Even though we were both faster than my middle brother, he like no quit. We were playing capture the flag one time, and we were playing 2 out of 3 games, and we won the first game. We're playing the second game. My middle brother stepped on a 4-inch pitchfork all the way through his foot mid-game.
Oh my word!
Didn't stop. Kept playing. Won the game. And I was like, what is
bleeding
wrong with
profusely?
you? What is wrong with you?
Yeah, seriously.
And it's just like, it's that like no quit attitude. Sometimes I'm like, I'd be better at cycling if I had that.
Yeah.
I was like, I feel like he's got that little bit of asshole in him that's just like,
never quitting.
Asshole's the wrong word. Yeah, but like self-assuredness of like, I'm
Just
doing
like
the right
grit.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so crazy.
Yeah. So we played a lot of capture the flag growing up too.
Yeah. I jumped out of the back of a semi one time and landed on an old rake, and it went into my foot. Yeah. But I can't say that I kept on. We were at like this work bee, like picking up logs and chucking them into the back of these 2-ton trucks and getting rid of them. But I like basically cried like a baby.
And to add context to that story, he was not wearing shoes. So it was straight through the.
Oh my word. Wow. What a crazy
He's
guy.
just stubborn.
What does he do now? What is your brother doing now?
Aerospace welder.
Okay. Yeah.
Crazy. Graduated high school with a 1.7 GPA, and he now has security clearance.
Yeah, that's wild. So he's working on like the modern SR-71s and stuff.
No,
Maybe
it's
not
like,
quite,
I think it's more like aerospace obviously is a weird space, like heat exchangers for Airbus and random things that come in. Big things that I think it's more clearance in terms of like, how do you connect these things together?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but it's really cool. I mean, he's just driven, right? Like school wasn't the perfect thing for him, but he knew exactly, like he's the trade guy, right? We always have this, it's a good question for you actually, but we always have this debate in our family. What's the best professions your siblings can have that are helpful? Like lawyer, doctor, like my brother Rem is probably, we just call him the best profession because he can do almost anything with his hands. He learned so quickly, whether it's off YouTube or just in general. He just like, he got given the family Suburban when he turned 16. I swear it was in 1,000 pieces in the gravel driveway the minute he got it. Put it all back together.
Wow, that's amazing.
Crazy.
Yeah, he's the guy you want to be with when stuff hits the fan and you need to survive.
When the zombies attack, I'm going to his house.
Oh man, that's funny. So a second ago, like you mentioned, your grandpa or your grandfather, or Appa, is that how you say it?
Opa.
Opa. So Catholicism was a huge thing in his life. Did any of that religion or spirituality rub off on you?
No, we were raised Jewish.
Okay.
But also, so my mom's side of the family is Jewish, and if anyone asked me, I'd still say I'm Jewish.
Yeah.
Just in terms of like the mother being how Judaism moves through families. But we were also raised to understand that like every religion has its own meanings. Like we still celebrated Christmas because my grandparents obviously did. So we'd have Hanukkah and Christmas.
Cool.
And we went to synagogue a couple times. Like my youngest brother went to Hebrew day school, had a bar mitzvah, but I didn't. It kind of just depended on what worked, what we wanted. So I would say like I learned a little bit, but I was always, especially when I started traveling, like you always learn really quickly. Like religion is this thing that is such a great belief for some people when they need it, and a faith, right? To know what's ahead or to persevere. But it's also the thing that separates a lot of us. And so I think from a young age, like honestly, like 16, 17, I started realizing that like most people, again, almost back to coaching, most people, they have not made any decisions by the time they're talking about religion in high school, right? Whatever their parents did, that's what they are. And I think that's fine in the beginning, but at some point you need to actually think, right? I wish there was a point where people said, okay, you're 18 now. What have you learned? Do you believe everything your parents taught you?
And if so, why?
Yeah. Because it's not that faith can be an amazing thing. But you have to find the reasonings why that applies to your life and other people around you.
So what did you decide on?
Like, again, I would say that I would still align with Judaism most. Yeah. But it's mainly because like I believe there's a God, but I wouldn't say like, I wouldn't say I believe Jesus was a special man and walked the earth. Like that's probably the biggest difference between Christian or Catholic religions and Judaism is they just believe Jesus was a guy. He wasn't something special.
A guy versus God.
Yeah. And and I think I don't want religion to ever dictate how I live my life. And that's also, something that I think in certain religions, people feel caught, especially nowadays. Like, do you believe being gay is okay? Right? Like things that I think are not like, they're very human choices. They're not based on what we read in the book 100 years ago. And so I think it's harder nowadays to align with something, but like, I don't go to church. I don't go to synagogue. I believe God exists, but that's about it.
Yeah. Interesting. So you are in a relationship, correct? Yeah. And are you married?
Nope, not yet.
Not yet. So this is an
Some point.
item. Yeah. An item on the future to-do list.
Yeah, at some point. We've been dating since 2019. Sophie races triathlon.
Yeah.
ICU.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always say, like, I feel like I was always not rushed into, but sooner than most people did, I'd move in with somebody, because I believe that's how you get to know someone best. Like, you're like, can I deal with this? Can I not? What are your worst qualities?
Yeah.
So we've lived together since quite a long time now. It's coming up on 6 years.
Yeah.
So that's why I say yet, is there'll be a time, just both doing our own things, and it's been really busy. She went to Paris last year for the Olympics, and that's its own crazy thing, and I'm trying to race, and I think that final, like, we bought the house together, not like one of us owns it. Just trying to find that time of when works best to plan something like that together.
Yeah.
Then when do I ask that question? How do you ask that question? And I think a lot of that, even this, buying a house together, like, I think it comes from that kind of like European attitude. Like, Europeans, you're like, oh, you're not married and you have a kid? Like, that's weird. And it's such a religious thing, I think, in the US, of like, there's an order to it. That I think there's just less subscription from me or her to that, as opposed to just like we're very much committed to enjoying our lives together, but there hasn't been that exact tying moment legally.
You haven't made it happen legally. I mean, for all intents and purposes, I would say you're pretty much married, right?
She's got an Aura ring, so I just need to get mine.
Exactly. So do you still want 3 kids? You said that a little bit earlier, but like, you're thinking 3?
Yeah, I got to remember I'm the male, right? I don't have to have 3 kids.
Yeah.
But yeah, I always tell Sophie, and anybody that'll listen, she gets annoyed at me when I talk about it in public, but I'm like, I want 3 kids, because it's what you grew up with, right? I was so obsessed with having 2 brothers, and I learned so much from that experience that I think I don't want to be the dad who always has to like try to teach your child. I want him to learn from his siblings, hopefully, right? That like, you want empathy to come from caring for your brother, looking out for your significant other, like, you want action to be viewed, not taught sometimes. And I think that's really hard as an adult to a kid, especially nowadays with the internet. And like, even like one of those crowning moments of like my middle brother, like, I always thought he thought what I did was really stupid when I was racing, right? Like, he's like, oh, I shaved his legs. And I'll never forget, like, he would make fun of me. And he had 3 friends over, and I was shaving my legs in the bathroom, and like, one of them came in after and went back, like, making fun of me. My brother socked the shit out of that kid, right? One of his best friends.
I can make fun of him,
he's like,
I
can make fun, but you can't, right? And that
probably made you feel good.
It's just a weird moment, right? When you're that age and you're like, oh, like, Rem's a dick to me, but why is he? He's also protective, right? He's also cares. And yeah, there's truly, no matter how great of friends you are, there's nothing like a sibling. So I say I want 3 kids. Like, I make a joke that I want 3 boys. I'm going to point the bed north and take a cold shower.
Do everything you can.
Yeah, do everything I can. Pray to my God.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's also that I just, I do want kids. I feel like I've been in my dad era since I was 25. I'm just ready for it.
Dude, me too. Yeah. I'm 32. I've been after my wife for a while, and she wanted to go to school and all this other stuff. But yeah, there's something about, I think, being a parent. Because my sister, she's 4 years younger than me, middle sister, and she has a 1-year-old and has a second one on the way. And just, it was the craziest thing. Like, I didn't think I'd be even emotional, but she called me when she was at the hospital after she had my little nephew, and she's like, you want to come see him? I was like, yeah, sure. And then I like just started crying on my way, and I was like, what is wrong with me? Like, who am I? I mean, I'm a pretty emotional person, but I don't know why it hit me in a different way. I didn't know you could be that attached to someone. So I can only imagine having son or daughter, like, that the connection would be that much deeper.
Yeah, it's also stressful. I feel like I look at kids around me sometimes, and I'm like, God, you guys messed up that one. But like, I think it's like, again, like, it's trying to find what can you learn about like the way to raise a kid, and then how do you use your life experience to steer that conversation or relationship too, because it's so much of it is, again, from our parents.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, there's a lot of nature and there's a lot of nurture. Nobody can ever, I think, split down the middle and say when or what set of circumstances made someone go a certain direction. It's really hard to know, but yeah, it definitely matters. Parenting matters.
And you're also meshing two families, right? Like you talk about that, like you're meshing a life of your wife and you, and how, okay, maybe one of you celebrated like this and one of you celebrated like that. And one person gave tooth fairy money, one person didn't. Like it's all these different things, all these miniature decisions that no longer, like, I deal with decision making really well, I think. And Sophie less so. She thinks about it a lot, and it's everything decisions can add up. And I think you got to remember, like, all those are now mutual decisions when you have a kid. It's not like I can just make decisions alone or she can make decisions alone. You have to like come together.
Joint partnership.
Yeah. All the little things, you know?
Yeah. 100%. So speaking of decisions and on that topic, you were 24 when you decided to make the transition from road to gravel. And I don't want to assume too much, but I would assume to a degree that, you know, from 16, the dream being, I want to be over in Europe, I want to race the Tour de France. There were a set of circumstances and experiences that happened that began to shift your thinking. Maybe it became less of like this glowing orb in the sky that you really wanted to get after this Tour de France thing. And maybe it wasn't as glamorous as it first was, but what was your story in that timeline that eventually led to that decision to say goodbye to the pavement and hello to the dirt?
It wasn't like a black and white decision. I think like my time on Yumbo, on Lotto, was like everything I could ask for at that age. It was the dream. Like it was like I was living in the golden years already at 20, 23, 22. There's obviously things that come in that like you realize you're an adult and this is a job, and like the risk versus what I was being paid honestly was the final straw. Like I was offered less than I was going to make and I was currently making. And I was like, I didn't want to go backwards. And maybe now that was an immature choice, but it felt like that was not an option. But it's crazy now thinking back is like making the jump I did was even crazier than leaving something I worked for 15 years, you know?
Yeah, because security, it's unknown.
Yeah, but so is road cycling, right? Contracts are 1 to 2 years max, unless you're winning everything. And I think it's one, you realize how hard it is, how great everybody is. Like, I was good. I was maybe great in America. I was not over in Europe. And again, you never know what could happen. But I think very quickly, like I knew in my mind, like I made it here. How do I feel? What's that risk? Like in that 2016, 2017, like Wouter Wayland, one of the Belgian riders before, had just passed away at the Giro. Like people were dying more often in road cycling than they were in F1, right? It's just a dangerous sport. And then you weigh that with like what you're getting paid, which at the time in the beginning, you're like, oh, all my friends are spending money on college and I'm making money. But quickly that changes, right? They come out of school, they have a degree, they know what they're doing in their life. It felt like I was just kind of grasping at that next rung, but I didn't actually know what it was. So I think a lot of the decision came down to like, okay, one, am I confident and comfortable enough to give up the dream of going to the Olympics and going to the Tour de France? Because I haven't done those things, and the minute I leave the road, I will never do those things. Like that's that simple. And then two, why I'm making the decision financially. What I want to do. Do I want to have a family in Europe? Do I have a family in the US? And this is crazy to me, like, but this is how my mind works. Like I'm thinking about this at 23, 24, you know, like,
yeah.
And I think the end all be all came that I was like, okay, say I signed 1 or 2 more years and I'm 26, 27. Where am I? If I'm in the same place in 2 years and I still don't know where I'm going and I still don't know what I can do after my racing career, then this isn't valuable. This isn't fun anymore. And I just quickly had this idea of like what I was going to do. And it's funny because the next like 8 months after that were pure chaos where I had no idea what I was going to do. And I was like, oh, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have left. Like, this is horrible. This is what I've done for a decade of my life. And I know what I want. But I like kind of settled in to realize like, okay, I left the road. I'm here to learn. Why am I trying to go backwards? So quick synopsis of that was stopped 2017 was my final year on the road. 2018, I was like, maybe I should have stayed on the road. And I like went back and raced for a Conti team for 6 months. And I finally, like in July, I was like, this is stupid. Like I need to move home from Europe. I need to make decisions. And I thought I was going to be a mountain biker which kind of turned me toward the dirt. But at that same time, gravel off-road scene was growing, and the biggest excitement I saw wasn't actually racing. It was this peer-to-peer communication directly with companies where I was learning what I want to do. It was like having an interview with a company, even though, I wasn't asking to be part of that company. I was asking to be paid, right? And each of those conversations you learn and you're exciting. And I was like, for the 2 years I had in the World Tour, or maybe even before that, for the 3 years I was in the under 23 development team at BMC, those 5 years I felt like I didn't learn much. I learned about cycling. I learned about nutrition. I learned about the coaching and how to move forward to be the fastest and fittest. But like, I stopped getting better at things when you stop going to high school. And that was a big moment for me when I moved back. It's like, okay, I don't have a college degree. So now how do I learn? What am I excited about? And that's the biggest change from where I was 24 to where I'm at 30 is obviously we had COVID, we had a lot of things. But my biggest takeaway is I now know, like, I'm not worried about getting a job afterwards. I've learned so much, whether it's marketing, whether it's content creation, whether it's producing film. Like, I love being involved. And I've gone through so many different iterations of what that means. Like, at first I thought I wanted to be a venture capitalist, right? Then you dive into that and you're like, this sucks. Like, I don't want to spend this much time, right? Mm-hmm. But it has that piece of it that I loved. I love fundraising. I love creating relationships where money's dedicated and how you can positively impact different people and places and things. And so I never would have ever learned that on the road. You're so separated from the world. And now with gravel, I get to still race competitively and love what I do. But I had this opportunity to like learn about what's next, right? Because none of us know. You could crash next week and that's the end, right? I could have a heart thing next month, right? And that could end it. And being confident and understanding that like that's part of endurance sport. I always want to love riding a bike. The minute that's less fun, I'm not going to be a bike racer anymore. So it's finding, again, that balance of where and how that transition was. And so that was like, it felt like a very heavy decision in the moment, but it's kind of been this slow transition into who I am now, based on these small little micro decisions I felt like I was making at the time.
So who do you identify with more, I say who, but how do you identify closer with now, being a content creator or a pro athlete?
Pro athlete.
Yeah.
Because I think if you think you're a content creator, then you're lying to yourself about your value you offer to a company. This is the biggest thing I could teach young athletes, and I try, is that if you think Instagram followers sell bikes, you're lying to yourself. All right? At the end of the day, sponsors support athletes, whatever the sport might be, because they're trying to sell product. That can be just getting their name out. What is this insurance company? That can be directly involved in the endemic version of it, selling bikes, right? Envy. Or it can just be relationship based, right? I've had companies that come on and sponsor because there's someone who's made their money somehow and they just love bike racing and they want to be involved. They want to be at the race. They want to be supporting something. And so I think if content creation is what I am, then I've lost the vision of what I actually want to be.
Very well put. Do you feel the pressure to be more and more, though, more of a content creator than being the athlete?
No, I think it's another medium. Like, I love Substack. I don't know if anyone's read Patrick Crawford, but he does a lot of newsletters based upon relationships with content creation, with athletes, with
brands.
And it's interesting. There was one of the first, I think I got forwarded by Ben Delaney, who's a kind of a privateer content creator after he got let go from Outside. And it was this graph showing social medias and how they've grown in the past, and how they've waned, right? TikTok and Instagram and Foursquare, everything. And YouTube has been the one constant that's continually grown, because I think it's able to create and show personality at a larger level. There's only so much time you have at an event. I dedicate everything I have, and I would say a minimum I ever spend on an expo is 4 to 5 hours. That's like sitting there talking to people, right? And part of that is
just to bring value.
Not even bringing value, just talking to people, right? As the notoriety of gravel's grown and I've won a couple races, people have so many questions, whether it's about equipment or whether it's about something else. And most companies, it's a struggle to have a customer service line with a human nowadays, right? So some of these things are like very generic and basic, but that's that moment that you connect with someone and sell a bike, or sell something else, or convince someone to do a race or whatever it might be. And then I think the step beyond that was never planned, but just happened during COVID, is my dog Willie, or Sophie's dog Willie, that she had him before we started dating, is this barrier breaker. Everyone comes up, and that's how these conversations start, is like, you'll have someone who doesn't have any idea what bike racing is. They're just there because their dad or husband's racing, and they want to hang out with Willie, the only dog in the venue, right? And I think you're able to just have these down-to-earth conversations, kind of like we're having right now, that transform and change the way that I think about things and the way that people are doing things. And then that makes me excited to do that on YouTube, because I'm able to like just have a bigger audience, right? That doesn't have to happen at the expo in these set amount of hours. Mm-hmm. This can happen generically whenever someone's bored on the trainer or just taking a poop.
We've all been there on the YouTube poops or the Instagram Reels poops.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah. So I think it's just like, I don't feel pressure. I just enjoy it, honestly. And a lot of that is like, it's not based on like paying someone to create videos. Like Avery and he's my friend who edits all these videos and films all these videos. Like, gravel is really boring by myself. I got a friend in it now, right? We go to the races together. We film stuff. Like, the race might be the reason why we're somewhere, but the content is about us and what we're doing and how we're taking something on, which is always the most exciting for me to go watch anything, right? I love Ted Lasso. Everyone loved Ted Lasso because it was about feelings. It was about where you are and what you're doing. You love Drive to Survive because they take the drama and add it in, right? That's kind of like, you want to feel like you're there without, yes, spectacular. It's human. And so, I don't know. The minute I start feeling pressure to create videos, I don't think I'll love doing it anymore. And that said, we create goals for it. Like, hey, we want to do 2 videos a month, and that might add some stress or pressure on, but it's because we want to be consistent, as opposed to being like, we have to do this for sponsors.
100%. So if I was to, I'm gonna step out on a limb here in a little bit, but if I was to guess on a scale of 1 to 10, your happiness and fulfillment of where you currently sit, based on an only meager 59 minutes and 37 seconds, I would say you're probably at like an 8 out of 10, maybe 8.5. Where would you say you sit on that scale? I know it's totally arbitrary.
Yeah, 8.5. I mean, I think the one thing is like, I want to win the Grand Prix. The competitive side of me, like, I feel like there's just a tiny bit left of like, I've sacrificed some things on the side to do it, and like, Keegan's been dominant, and I respect the hell out of Keegan. He's a phenomenal athlete, not unbeatable. And so that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I feel like the last couple of years, I've enjoyed a lot of learning how to exist where I am right now, and trained at 80 to 85%. Like, I've put a lot of work in, but just not that last little bit. And, I'm not going to like take away the person I am. Like, I still have other things going on. Like, I run this project called From the Ground Up. It's based upon like everyday people taking on Leadville. Like, that takes up a lot of my time, and I'm still focused on being the best like person off the bike I can be. I'm not going to stop going to expos, but beyond that, I want to do everything I can and try to take a run at being competitive. Other than that, I don't know what other happiness I've filled. Like, I never thought I'd buy a house in Boulder, but we bought a house. I've got a dog. I love racing. Things can change quickly, but I think it's a lot about just like that management of your enjoyment at a given time. And it's easy to say, hard to do sometimes, but like, if you're unhappy, change.
Yeah.
Change something.
Yeah. It's just like one of those elimination diets. Start cutting stuff out or start adding stuff in until you figure out what you like or don't like. That's some sound advice.
And I've said this a lot, but my best analogy to like how I'd feel right now at a given time is like, I'm super satiated. Like, if I'm grabbing dinner, like, pasta's on my plate, salad's on my plate, the greens are on my plate. The things that fall off, the things I'm losing right now that I'm like trying to juggle things and balance, is like the taste occasionally, right? I might lose the salad dressing. I might lose the salt. I might lose the pasta sauce, but like, I'm still doing everything I want to do. And until that plate starts like losing those things, I'm going to keep filling up all my days, because I'm just the happiest I've been in. Like, and every day so far has been as good as the last, if not better. And that's just exciting, right? And that trend goes up and down. That's over the view of your whole life. But I'm learning, I'm enjoying, I'm having fun. And like, that's a really, you listen to people who get older and you ask advice, and that's what they struggle, right? It's like, it truly is have fun. if you can find a way to do that, that's exciting.
Yeah. And the only way you're going to find that. Yeah.
Yeah. The adult side of it is that money does matter also.
Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah. Where do you find that? You got to find the cash, find the passion, and
Yeah.
then find the need or the value that you're able to add or the need that you're able to fulfill. And that's not an easy thing, but the only way we can find that is by trying a bunch of things. Luckily for you, your grandpa was able to push you for that 15 miles and give you that feeling of, wow, I never want to bonk again, but I love this. Like, that's a huge thing. So let me ask you this final question. And I guess it's a little bit of twofold. Like, when is the next opportunity you're going to have to show Keegan what's up? And what do you feel like that extra 15% is really, like, practically speaking, that you're going to have to do or continue to do in order to get up to toe the line and make it happen?
Sea Otter next up, middle of April 10th is the race. First start of the Grand Prix. Yeah. It's a gravel race, 90 miles, 9,000 feet. To beat Keegan generically over the season, I just have to beat him at 4 races. You know, that's the simple side of it.
Mm-hmm.
Day to day, it's a little bit more focused on like all the extracurriculars, right? Stretching, recovery, gym. Like I used to like gym to me was like, oh, I'll go pound it out at home, do some push-ups, do some squats, get my shit done. Now I dedicate like an hour and a half Tuesdays and Thursdays, go to the gym, work with somebody, right? And that's not even like when I started working with him, his name's Jeff Hubler in Boulder, as like, I want to focus on being the fittest I am at 35, not 30. I was like, I need this to be a slow build, but I want to build out the baseline of being a healthy human, you know, a durable human. So day to day beyond that is not getting sick, right? The Grand Prix is only so many races. You got one drop race. So you get sick, ruins the year. That's the stressful part of it. And then just focusing on the little things that I can do, right? To bring a mechanic to all these races. So I'm not focused on trying to get my bike ready at the same time. Doing all the little scientific things about whether it's preparedness for the race on tires, tire pressure, to wax change, different things that, you know, are easy to like take up your mind. But if you can just make plans and decisions beforehand and allow yourself to be the person you are and come in relaxed to that race, I think I'll be great. And then I got to be a bit of an asshole. Like, to win races, you got to fight for yourself. You got to believe you can win. And it's not hard per se, but it's a mindset on the start line, you know, and that's not a person I always want to be. That's, I think, the hard part for me. But you have to be the most tenacious person as the gun goes off. And a little bit of just, you know, flipping the bird to everyone around you, even though they're your friends. So what it takes to win.
Well, I will say that your ability to articulate and communicate for this past hour and 6 minutes has been, to a degree, that we've had a lot of really good information that I hope a lot of people were able to take notes on, because you shared a lot. So thank you so much for taking the time, for dedicating your life to what you do to bring joy to those around you through the work that you do, and for the videos and reels that we've all seen of you and Willie. That there's something about a wiener dog on the back on a bike on a backpack on a bike that's just fun. We all love animals, so thanks for doing what you do, man. But yeah, thank you so much for answering my questions, and I'd love to do it again sometime, maybe even after the Grand Prix, see what you're doing.
Yeah. No, and I ramble a lot, but I appreciate it. I mean, you know, beyond YouTube, I think podcasts are the next best way to absorb information, right? So I appreciate you putting this out and taking the time. It's not easy, and I guess tell anybody they can reach out, because I answer all the questions.
Will do. Sweet. Thanks, man.
Yeah. Thanks, Seth.
Thank you so much to Alexey for coming on the pod, letting me dive into his life, and for him sharing some of those really meaningful stories, especially the one with his grandfather. Wish him all the best with the upcoming Sea Otter and Grand Prix races to hopefully give Keegan a run for his money. Yeah, just a super great podcast. So thank you so much for listening. If you guys are still listening, really appreciate you being here. If you want to sign up for the newsletter, you can do so at stupidquestions.show, or check out the link in the description. I am going to here soon start sending out a weekly email about the past episodes from the week, and then going to give kind of a recap of the things that I've learned. So if you'd find that interesting, sign up for that. Also check out the sponsor show notes and all of that stuff to continue to help grow the podcast. If you are watching on YouTube, if you could like, comment, subscribe, any and all of those things really help to continue grow the podcast. And I appreciate you for doing that. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, do the same. See whatever you can do on those platforms really does help to continue to grow. So thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next one.